So dealing with some health issues, but again, seem to be okay on a few fronts, improving. So all good. Otherwise, let's go ahead and take the questions.
I said the feedback. So the first question is from Kanurang.
Okay on a few fronts, improving. So all good.
Sorry.
Otherwise, let's go ahead.
Good morning, Guru Maharaj. Can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning.
My question is something that came up a few calls ago, and you were talking about sastra-nipuna and sastra-yukti, and talking about how Srila Prabhupada had said that he encouraged that person to go there and find out. And I was just wondering if you could, I don't know, maybe explain a little bit more about what sastra-nipuna is, and like what's the difference between sastra-nipuna and sastra-yukti, maybe. I sometimes think that maybe if Srila Prabhupada sort of had like a quick wit, or if someone had a quick wit and like we're able to just like say something that maybe there's more to sastra-nipuna than what I'm thinking.
Yes. Shastra-yukti means logic or reasoning. So we advocate Shastra-yukti as opposed to Keval-yukti. Keval-yukti means like just reasoning unto itself, unhinged from revelation. That's what happened in Europe with the scientific revolution. Prior to that, largely all the reasoning was related to the revelation of the biblical revelation, if you will. And so Keval-yukti is where much of modern philosophy has led us to. Not that it's arrived at a particular place that everyone agrees on, but Shastra-yukti then it means it basically means that there's a comprehensive way of knowing, and that's through revelation. If reality wants itself to be known in full, as it is ultimately, then that infinite reality can make itself available by its infinite power to the finite. That's the principle, if you will, of revelation. It's a significant point. And the point being, to say it another way, that intelligence as a vehicle or a means of knowing is insufficient in terms of arriving at comprehensive knowing, a knowing by which one will become fully satisfied. So to arrive at that kind of knowing, revelation is required. And then that doesn't mean that reasoning has no place in knowing, but when we reason about the implications of revelation, for example, in particular, scripture is a form of revelation, a prominent, form of revelation. When we reason about the significance, the meaning, the application, and so forth, that's called Shastra-yukti. Shastra-nipuna, on the other hand, nipuna means genius, so scriptural genius. I think it implies a even greater comprehension of scripture than that which Shastra-yukti involves, or necessitates in order to be able to do that successfully. And I like to use examples like the one that I did that you cited as scriptural kind of genius, which kind of takes one beyond the book, if you will, and expresses the limitations even of the book, even as the necessity of the text, as I'm mentioning, is considerable. That ultimately there's more than the book, so to speak. And that's just my way of speaking about sastra-yukti. I can't ground that in any text itself, if you will. So aside from that, scriptural genius means would mean a greater degree of comprehension of the scripture than the amount, as I said earlier, that's is required to successfully engage in sastra-yukti. Mm-hmm. So I believe that Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu has described the Uttamadhikari, or the one who is most qualified to tread the path, as one who is proficient in sastra-yukti and is a scriptural genius at the same time. So both of them apply. One, the latter, being kind of an extension of the former. Again, there's no hard definition. This is the sastra-nipuna here. Here's where it begins, and here's where the sastra-yukti, by comparison, leads off. But I guess by citing what I have at times, things like Prabhupada would say, or Pujapachita Maharaj would say, which I say are examples of sastra-yukti, is that I would look at it as the difference between reasoning about the scripture and realization that causes you to come up with some novel insights that otherwise one might not be able to do, even if they're proficient in scriptural reasoning, what the scriptures actually say. Let's say Shastra, what the scriptures actually saying, reasoning about it, putting in place, and so forth, that can be properly understood, and then the scriptural genius of coming up with just kind of spontaneously insights that take us a step further, if you will, and represent, rather than a spiritualized intellect appropriate for sastra-yukti, equipping one, qualifying one, giving one the necessary tools for reasoning about the implication, the meaning of a verse, for example, how it could mean in different ways and different things and so forth, looked at differently. That and kind of beyond spiritualized intellect, sastra-yukti. Sridhar Maharaj would say things, Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj at times, that would, in my estimation, distinguish him from someone who could reason about the implications of a verse, which is again an act of a spiritualized intellect. So I'm differentiating the two, although both are qualities of Rupa Goswami's definition of an Uttamadhikari. The latter implies greater standing in the landscape of that Scripture is trying to express and speak about. Mm-hmm. Hope that helps.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for unpacking that for us.
Okay.
The next
Hope
question.
you get to feeling better.
I am. Thank you.
Next question is from Sevanidhi.
Jai Guru Maharaj.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask about the tatastha-jiva tattva that you have touched upon when you went off on some tangents, and if you could expand some new ideas. I've heard that you mentioned last time, Ashtasakis are Swarupa Shakti manifestations, but the rest are tatastha-jivas in the spiritual world. It was new to me. If you can expand.
Well, yeah, I can say a few things. It's stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahasankarshan, which is a manifestation of Baladev in Vaikuntha, is the shelter of Jiva Tattva and, by extension, Tatastha-Sakti. So he has that power. Now, and as a result, he manifests jivas in Vaikuntha, who are eternally liberated. Now, when we say he manifests them, it's not like something that happens within time. To give an example, the sun has its own internal combustion, and then it has rays that extend out beyond its globe and touch down, it's at some distance, right? Where some of the rays may be also covered by clouds. So that example, in that example, the tatastha-sakti are these rays, right? But if we look at the example, it's not like the rays are coming out here, some now, some later. They just exist. So when we talk about Mahasankarshan, for example, in Vaikuntha as being the source is almost isn't the right word. It's like shelter and support of the tatastha-jivas. It's not something that's it's all going on all at once, just to clarify that. So in the spiritual world, in the Vaikuntha expanse, if you will, there are innumerable tatastha-jivas. What it means is that there are jivas who are transformations, or vikar, transformations of the tatastha-sakti. By contrast, Radharani is said to be a transformation of the Hladini Shakti. This is mentioned by Sri Damodar's in Sri Damodar's verse that's cited in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Radha Krishna Pranay Vikritir Hladini Shakti Rasma. Vikriti means transformation. Swarup Shakti is inherent in Krishna, and a transformation of that is what constitutes Radha, whereby the one soul, Krishna, becomes two. One soul, two bodies. So she is distinct from the tatastha-sakti vikar transformations. And as such, she's worshipable along with Krishna. In the Ramanuja Sampradaya, you find a similar conviction and support for the idea that Lakshmi is not a jiva. So you have Narayan, you have Lakshmi. So Radharani, her expansions as Sita, Lakshmi, and so forth and so on. These are then the not transformations of the tatastha-sakti. Now, it's also stated that Radharani has expansions of herself in Goloka, aspects of herself, different bhavas that her Mahabhav contains to isolate one, manifest it in form. Rupa Goswami, for example, Rupa means form, but also means beauty, is said to be, Rupa Manjari is said to be a manifestation of the beauty of Radharani. Just singular, right? Separated out. So by that reasoning, we could include them as well. Now, it's also thought in some circles, not in Gaudiya circles, but in Vaishnava circles, that Baladev is a jiva. Of course, we distinguish that no, that's not the case. He is an amsa of Krishna. And the jivas that are transformations of the tatastha-sakti are vibhinamsa. They're distinct atomic amsas. Amsa means like a part. So the distinct conscious entities. Krishna has many amsas, and there are many vibhinamsas. The amsas are like Ram, like different, really Narayan and the avatars, and so on and so forth. They're all Bhagwan. So they're different in that they're not atomic, and they're not separated. Separated means that they are one, but they're servants. So one of the meanings of tatastha-sakti, as it applies to the nitya-siddhas in the Paravyum, in the spiritual world, is that there's a differentiation between them and Krishna or his amsas. The differentiation, the separation, we call them separate. What is the separation? The separation is that they're servants. We separate them out. They're serving rather than objects of service, like Krishna and his amsas and Radha. It's understandable that Balaram might be construed to be a jiva by some, because although he's an amsa, he has the bhav of a servant, right? He's always serving Krishna in all respects, but he's an amsa, to be sure. So these vibhinamsas. Now, when we say vibhinamsa, we're talking about an atma. And an atma, as explained in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, has agency or is a doer. It has cognition. It has sentience. This is and it is sheshatva. It's a servant. So it's a servant, and it's cognizant, it's sentient, and it's a doer, has agency. So these are not characteristics of Shakti. Shakti is an ability, a capacity. So in order the tatastha-jiva, which is a vibhinamsa, to use another word that I've cited in some previous talks, Jiva Goswami says it's a dravya. A dravya means a substance, like earth is a dravya, fire is a dravya, water is a dravya. But the difference between the jiva and these things is that it is cognizant, it's sentient, and it has agency, and it's sheshatva, it's a servant. So it's a special kind of dravya. It's a self-aware and self-revealing, being conscious by nature. But dravyas are not shaktis, but they have shaktis, just like fire has the power or shakti to burn. Right? So the jiva has these qualities of agency, cognition, sentient, and above and beyond that, servitude. The first three serve the first one. They're means by which one expresses one's sheshatva, one's identity as a servant of Krishna. You do things for Krishna. You know things about Krishna. You feel, you have sentience in relation to. So these three are all ways in which the sheshatva, the servitude of the jiva, is expressed. Now, in order to express that, it requires some power. So that is the function of the Swarup Shakti. And all of the jivas in the spiritual world that are nitya-siddhas, let's give an example of one. I mean, we could pick any number, but let's, we only know a few names, right? And Jiva Goswami picks Garuda. He says Garuda is an example. And elsewhere he cites that Garuda is also the personification of the Vedas, the meters of the Vedas. I mean, Garuda is the carrier of Vishnu. See, he is a tatastha, nitya-siddha jiva. And he's fully endowed with manifest Swarup Shakti, by which he expresses himself in terms of knowing, feeling, doing in eternal servitude. Now, this in Vaikuntha, Narayan, he's full in himself and fully absorbed in his relationship of with his devotees. But Chaitanya Charitamrita says that there's nonetheless, at the same time, he has another desire that's related to but separate from what's going on in Vaikuntha. What is that desire? It's a desire to bestow mukti. And everyone there is a mukta, so there's no one to bestow it on. This is an expression of what we call shoka rati, or that it manifests in fullness as karuna. Karuna rasa is in Rupa Goswami's scheme is a secondary rasa, karuna rasa. The objects of karuna rasa could be Krishna, just like Mother Yasoda might feel compassion for Krishna, or the cowherd boys, they feel compassion for Krishna when he's surfaces from the Kaliya lake in the coils of the serpent. So they have karuna rasa. The sakya rasa turns, recedes to the background. Temporarily, karuna rasa becomes prominent. This is a form of a compassionate, empathetic. Karuna means like mercy, kindness. So we typically feel that for someone who's in difficulty, right? So Krishna sometimes in Goloka becomes the object of karuna rasa. Now Narayan, he's not going to find himself in any difficulty in Vaikuntha. So there's not much application for karuna rasa in Vaikuntha in terms of Narayan being the object of that karuna rasa. Now, it's also possible that the devotees of Krishna can be the objects of karuna rasa. So Krishna experiences, for example, karuna rasa for the gopas when they're entering into the mouth of Aghasura. Momentarily, this karuna rasa takes over. He feels compassion for them. So again, then in Vaikuntha, there's not much instance where Narayan's going to feel, my poor devotees in Vaikuntha, and express compassion for them. The nature of the Leela is different there, right? But there's a third object of karuna rasa, and that is the devotees' friends or relatives who may not even be devotees can be objects of karuna rasa. Rupa Goswami gives the example of Narada. Narada, upon contemplating the grace, the mercy that Brahma received in the Brahma Vimohan Leela, by which he ultimately attained Sakya Rasa, expresses Karuna Rasa for other sages like himself who attain Sayuja Mukti. He feels compassion for them. Oh, how unfortunate they are. How much they missed out. So we have three different objects of Karuna Rasa. So how will Karuna Rasa apply then in Vaikuntha? Vishokarati. Narayan, although fully satisfied in Vaikuntha, nonetheless desires to bestow mukti upon someone. And corresponding with that desire, which means he has a full face of compassionate love also, is Mahavishnu, the avatar. From Mahasankarshan comes Mahavishnu, who presides over the Maya Shakti. Right? If we describe the sun planet, right, as the abode of Krishna, and the internal combustion there as the heat and light, the samvit, sandini, the ladini and samvit, the bliss, the feeling, heat, and samvit, the knowing, light. These are expressions of the components of the internal Shakti, samvit, ladini, and the globe itself, the sandini, the existential component of Sarup Shakti. And the rays as tatastha-sakti, which are both tatastha-jivas and they're liberated, and now we're coming to the conditioned ones that emanate from Mahavishnu, who is the first avatar, and he's the avatar of Mahasankarshan. Mahasankarshan manifests this. So in that example of the sun, you have the sun globe, as I say, it's the internal combustion. You have the rays, and there's also then the spectrum of light that occurs through reflection. That's the colors like the rainbow, at the end of which there is no pot of gold. But it's very, very fascinating. So the jivas, chase after it and so forth. This is just the nature of the circumstances. Mahavishnu, like Krishna, who expands as Radha, as Baladev, like Mahasankarshan, we can say as Mahasankarshan in Vaikuntha expands, if you will, becomes many. Similarly, Baladev in Goloka, because Mahasankarshan is the expansion of Balaram. So in Goloka, the special planet, he expands the forms, the dham, the amsas, the vibhinamsas that are tatastha mukta jivas. So when the same person in the form of Mahavishnu expanding from Mahasankarshan, who expands from Baladev, Mool Sankarshan, Mahasankarshan, and so forth, he does the same thing. He becomes many, right? But his jurisdiction is the Maya Shakti, and so the meeting of the Jiva and the Maya Shakti that turns the Maya Shakti on becomes problematic for the Jivas, and they're chasing rainbows, right? But now these Jivas, what is the difference between these transformations as the tatastha-sakti and the nitya-siddhas? There is no ontological difference mentioned anywhere. Ontologically, they're the same. And Sanatana Goswami and Brihad Bhagavatam makes the point that some may reason, well, there's a difference between the jivas, nitya-siddha jivas, and Bhagwan, and that they're his servants. Radharani is tad-sarupya, they're tad-rupya, but they become tad-sarupya in a secondary sense because they're endowed with Swarup Shakti by which they can function. And this endowment is inherent in them. It's not that they came out of Mahasankarshan at some time and then Krishna put some Swarup Shakti inside of them. Again, that would be a misunderstanding, right? They're endowed with fully manifest Swarup Shakti, by which they can fully express themselves, because it takes Shakti to express oneself. Like a dravya, like I said earlier, a substance like fire, it requires the Shakti in order to burn. It has burn Shakti, right? So jivas are another definition for dravya as a person, and it applies in this case because these dravyas that are the jivas, whether they're nitya-mukta or nitya-baddha, liberated or conditioned, they have agency, they have cognizance, they have sentience, they're by nature servants. This is their very nature, this is their being, this is their dharma, that's what they're for. They have inherent knowledge, they have inherent bliss. So they're persons and they have powers. Now, in the material world, these jivas, they're not different ontologically from the nitya-muktas, but the difference is that they're turned away from Bhagavan rather than turned towards Bhagavan. This being turned away it's not something that happened in time, but they're manifest by the one, if you will, becomes many. Of course, this happens in cycles. Cycles have no beginning. So at each beginning of each cycle, they remanifest, and they're infinite in number. But the show, if you will, of material nature is powerful and large, and they become captivated by it, even though they turn it on and they're superior to it. I've given an example. You might turn on the TV and it wouldn't have a life without you, but it might take over your life, or the computer. So such the situation for the Buddha jivas. And therefore Narayan avatars and manifest the Vedas and so forth to help them meet their maker and turn them back to Bhagavan. So their inherent swabhav is covered by the fact that they've turned away, and then they've identified in that turning away with material nature. In that identification with material nature, they're doers, they're cognizant, they're sentient, but only in a limited sense. And the vehicle or the capacity by which these qualities are expressed is the Maya Shakti. So the Maya Shakti couldn't do anything if it wasn't turned on by the jiva. Therefore, the jiva is the doer. But for all intents and purposes, the Maya Shakti is carrying things out. Experience, sentience, takes place in the mind. But the mind has no power to experience unless the jiva is present. So the jiva is the experiencer, but indirectly, because it's really happening. It's happening in the mind, but the jiva is identified with the mind. You understand? The jiva identifies himself with the actions of the body, which are actually being done by material nature, having been turned on by the jiva. So and the knowing of the jiva, Maya Shakti has a vidya and avidya portion. The more you come in touch with the vidya portion, like sattva guna, the more you come to know what you really are and be able to discriminate between matter and spirit and so forth. Conversely, the more you're under the influence of the avidya portion, the more you're identified with the matter and the less you really know. But there's some kind of material knowing, right? Both vidya and avidya. So the cognitive, the sentient, and the sentience and the agency of the jiva is muted. It's mediated in conditioned life by the Maya Shakti, which is the Shakti, the power by which it becomes kind of an indirect doer, an indirect knower, an indirect feeler, right? So as it turns away from the Maya Shakti through sadhusanga and so forth, then its inherent nature begins to manifest. Its inherent nature begins to manifest. And with that, the Swarup Shakti begins to manifest, by which it can express itself in an unmediated way, fully as a doer, as a knower, as an experiencer. And that's the difference between material life and spiritual life. It's doing, it's knowing, it's sentient, is mediated. It's not direct. But in spiritual life, it's direct. The agency, the power for such expression is the Swarup Shakti, which is then becomes manifest, fully manifest. So this is the idea. There's a long explanation. But
Thank you very much.
Recently written an article about this, so I'll publish it shortly.
Yeah, you clarified a lot. Thank you so much.
Okay.
The next question is from Matthew.
Matthew.
Hello, Maharaj. My question is about how to relate to worshippers of devas, like demigods in the parlance. My question comes out of, I guess, two things. First of all, on a personal level, I know a number of people who are worshippers of, Devi or Shiva or whatever, and who I relate to on a personal level. And the sort of theoretical question is, it seems like, as I understand it, Krishna has made dispensation for people at various levels of development and capacity, etc., that they can find elevation spiritually through relating to Shiva or Devi or whatever the case may be. And then here we are as Gaudiya Vaishnavas who are saying that those are either limited in functionality, for instance, they confer material but not spiritual benefits, some of them, or that perhaps they convey spiritual benefit on some level, but it's on a lower level. It's not, for instance, it's tamoguna instead of sattvaguna. I guess what confuses me is it seems like Krishna has sort of generously made dispensation for people to ultimately be approaching him through those forms. And I'm wondering if it's possible for us to work at cross purposes to that. If we're sort of coming along and saying, well, actually, these are lower forms, and worshiping Krishna directly is the higher, better form. And in a sense, we're discouraging people from what might actually be the right thing for them. So I guess my question is about how to sort of, speak the truth as we understand it, while also being respectful of Krishna's dispensation, and also just not coming. I think you probably understand what I'm saying without me going any further.
I do. Yes. Yeah, the Vedas are very broad and generous, and they find different ways to bring people in the right direction, directly, indirectly. Gyan and karma margs are two paths articulated in the sacred texts, and then there's bhakti, right? And it's said with regard to bhakti and the chanting of the holy name of Krishna, which is central to bhakti, especially in our time, that it is an offense to the name to vilify the paths of karma and gyan in the Vedas. Because they're given in the Vedas for certain people who have the adhikar for that. And at best, that's for most people. You could say most have, lack adhikar and they're subhuman. They're dvipada pashu. A lot of them in this country, in my country. Two-legged animals. They're not even human, practically, in their sensibility. They lack a heart. So, but amongst, to put it another way, Krishna says that there's two types of people. There's those of a demonic disposition and those of a godly disposition. Now that could change, perhaps, according to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that can change. Those of a demonic disposition can change. It may take extreme measures in some instances because people can be pretty demonic. But with regard to the divine natures, then you have a gradation also. And the largest kind of net, if you will, to capture them and help them in the system is called varnashram, which is not very applicable today in one sense. It's not in place, but it involves largely learning to express gratitude. So for the macrocosmic manifestations of nature that we are dependent upon in order to function as a sensual being, like the sun in order to see, like the wind in order to speak, are venerated, right? So there's the Surya Namaskar, worship the sun, worship the wind, worship the water, and the idea is that behind matter is consciousness. This is the Daivanit-trena. It's a controlling force that's a partial manifestation of the Godhead. So you have Saraswati, you have Surya, this, and Chandra, and so on and so forth. These are names of the Godhead that represent features that are fully present in the Godhead, separated out for a particular purpose in a particular realm. We call them devas or devis. They represent a fraction or partial manifestation of the full consciousness of the Godhead for a particular purpose, and it's an overseeing purpose, it's a controlling purpose, and they become then objects of worship for us, by which, in a very beginning way, we can proceed towards a goal such as prem, for example, in that within prem, such a high idea of love, gratitude is also found. So to show gratitude and recognize that I'm a dependent being. I'm dependent upon the sun to see and on the wind to speak and so on and so forth. So I'm proceeding in the world with gratitude. It's very beautiful. And this varnashram is the largest net, so to speak, that's cast by the sacred scriptures to capture and assist those of a divine mentality in pursuing divinity. Now, in the context of pursuing that, one can come to gyan. So the idea is first inquire about religion, which would be this gratitude, if you will, and it's a kind of a thinking before you act. What am I doing? What's involved in my doing? I'm not an independent doer. I'm a dependent doer, so I should show regard for those upon whom I depend. My parents, the forefathers, ancestors, the sun, the moon. It's everywhere, So from inquiring about religion, dharma, comes inquiring about the self, and that's Gyan Marg. So, as I said before, in a classical situation, the religious inquiry is placed before the scripture, and the scriptures are there, and they answer. And as a result of pursuing the religious life, one develops faith in the scriptures, looks deeper into it, comes to the Upanishads, and realizes, well, I was living a beautiful religious human life, but I'm not a human. My humanity distinguishes me from animality, but it gives me the opportunity to pursue spirituality. Wow. So Gyan. Then in Gyan, rather than worship of nature, we turn to the self. We turn inward. We're coming to experiential spirituality rather than just a religious coloring our human life with religiosity, which will soften the heart a little bit, and so this system, right? Now, That said, if we have sadhusanga from Vaishnavas, then we can get adhikar or eligibility for bhakti, which just takes us beyond the limits of gyan, or said another way, it's the end of gyan. The highest knowing is bhakti. To love one is to know one. Right? So it's said in the Gita, relative to your question, one should not disturb the minds of those who are materially attached. I believe in the 4th chapter, speaking about gyan. Those who have gyan shouldn't just go to disturb people and say, you're pursuing this, but you should be pursuing the Atma. They're too attached for that. So they should be left alone. And then it's a gradual, let the Vedas do their thing. It takes time, something like that. Now, does that apply to a devotee? Not necessarily, because a devotee could say, you're doing all these things, but you could be doing them the same things without stopping them, which you might do in gyan, but doing them, for Krishna, for example. Remain active, in other words. So bhakti is much softer than gyan. Gyan's very harsh. And renunciation is an anga of gyan. Renunciation is a result of bhakti, not a way to bhakti, but it's a byproduct of bhakti. So there's a big difference. Bhakti is a very soft path. Gyan, yoga are very effort-based. And as I often say, the effort in bhakti is to get grace, help, something like that. So because of its softness and its generosity, there is a possibility of that you will not be violating that statement of the Gita if you disturb the minds of the karmi, so to speak. And maybe disturb's not the best word, because it's a soft method. You won't be disturbing their mind if you give them the bhakti perspective. Now, in the modern world, yes, we have friends who worship Shiva or Durga, Devi, and so forth. I think that most of those people probably see themselves as spiritual, and they worship those gods or goddesses, not with an idea of material acquisition per se, which would maybe be a bad idea for them in their opinion, but more so for liberation, for the idea of that we're all one in a kind of a broad, generic, neo-Advaitin kind of perspective. And they would say, or worship Krishna if you like, Devi, Krishna, Shiva. Now you come in and say, well, wait a minute, it's not exactly like that. You're going to get different results, and so on and so forth. I think that of course, it depends how well thought out their worship of Shiva or Devi is. I mean, there are real serious paths and scriptures that, accordingly, and so on and so forth. And then there's just, kind of a Western, pick it up where you want and leave off what you want and decide that you made it better, kind of approach. But if they're serious worshippers of Shiva and they want a form of what we would call Sayuja Mukti, merging with Brahman, then you can let it be. In a sense, it's. I look at it. Well, that's a goal. My goal, on the other hand, is this, and my reasoning about it is, considerable. But to put it briefly, I reason that it's better. If I had a choice between loving to exist or existing to love, I'd choose the latter. I think it'd be more noble. And that's what Bhakti says. So what I do in my own circumstances, I just make suggestions. I tell what I do. What you do is fine. I understand it. And I may understand it better than you. It's possible. I mean, talking to someone else, it's possible. I've read about that. I studied that. But this is my path. And there's a distinction between my path and your path. It doesn't mean my path. I don't have to say my path is better. You can decide for yourself. Why I chose it. Obviously, I think it's better. That's why I chose it. I chose to worship Krishna rather than making Shiva my god. Because, for example, it's said that Shiva is a Vaishnava. You know, and you know, you give examples of why you're compelled to do what you do, and let people decide whether it's a better idea or not. And if they feel it is, if you struck a note with them, you know, then you can build upon that. You take kirtan, for example. So you can go to some yoga studio and they'll have Shiva kirtan or Devi kirtan. But they never stop to think that Shiva doesn't ask for kirtan. Devi doesn't ask for kirtan. Kirtan is not an anga of the Gyan Marg, which in a broad sense is about understanding oneness. We say understanding oneness is like, okay, that's beginning, good start, you know. There's a difference too. And the difference is very beautiful. If you want to take non-duality and ornament it, that's what we do. You want to have non-duality naked. We want to dress it up, you know. So that it has internal qualities that aren't different from it. It has internal qualities. It has its quality is part. Its knowledge, for example, is part of the jiva. So the jiva is eternal. So it must be eternal. Anyway, so this internal, I don't mean put extra ornaments on externally, but it has its own internal qualities, if you will, that don't just. So these are beautiful arguments that these people have never heard. And they're very beautiful. And there's very, very nice ways to put them as you become acquainted with them as suggestions or just explanations of your own path without dishonoring their path and so forth. So that's the way I would look at it. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, very good. What else?
The next.
Ramesh, can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
So you said that bhakti is such a soft path that people won't get disturbed if you say, like, tell somebody on Karma Kanda, you tell them about bhakti, but is that more kind of like a sales pitch, or do you actually believe that? The reason I'm asking is, like, if you think about like Prabhupada's preaching, or like even my own experience talking about the basics of bhakti, there's a lot of renunciation at the base of it, and it definitely disturbs people. So I was wondering about that.
Yeah, no, when I say that, I say it in the same context that with the same implications that the scriptures, extols the path of bhakti as being easier, more friendly, and so forth. So it's more friendly than the Gyan Marg unto itself. So if I say to somebody, you shouldn't be doing that because the results of that are temporary, and they're going to perpetuate your life in material existence, and you're really not the body. And these children of yours, and this husband of yours are just figments of your imagination. They've just come into being as a product of karma, and they'll disappear, and blah blah blah. And you just lay it out there. It's pretty bleak. Now, that's included in the path of bhakti, no doubt. My brother, I have a younger brother, went looking for me. I disappeared for quite a few years, and he ended up in a temple. And they preached to him. Tripurari Maharaj, that's a brother. Wow, they preached to him, and they told me this. These devotees, and my brother, and they said, "Ed, what do you think?" And after preaching to him for however long, he said, "It is as if I painted a picture of my life with watercolors, and you're throwing water on it." It's all dissolving. I mean, he had a good spirit about it, apparently, and he's a spiritual seeker himself. But yes, those elements are included, but comparatively, it's softer in its application. We don't tell people, for example, that they have to perform some extreme austerities to realize the difference. That there's no difference between hot and cold. It's only a mental, projection by the classic example is bathing in the Ganga at Rishikesh in the month of Magh, at midnight in the dark moon night, and conversely sitting, surrounded by fires in 120 degrees at the Rajasthani border of the Rajasthani desert to say fire, heat, cold, there's no difference. That's pretty harsh, if you will, compared to the softness with which bhakti addresses the issue. Chant, be happy, worship. You don't have to fast. You can offer nice foods to Krishna and so forth. So comparatively, it's softer and it's more friendly. But you're right that it's a path. It's part of the nivritti marg, the letting go of material life and so forth. And you have to assess, the extent to which anybody's really has any interest in that. I look to create if I can create, or somehow if a favorable teachable moment arises, well, there you go. I'm very reluctant to just like lay into anybody. There's devotees, as soon as they meet somebody, they start telling them they should change their lives and so forth. I'm not like that myself. So you have to look for a teachable moment amongst attached people. Otherwise, they're not going to listen. Will their mind be disturbed? Perhaps, but comparatively, bhakti does not apply as strictly as gyan does, in terms of its being a medium by which a materially attached person's mind will become disturbed upon hearing about the futility of attachment and how it's the womb from which suffering is born, etc. And by comparison, bhakti is, or gyan, or better. I mean, and also if you look at the end, it's a pretty, you think about it now, okay, you can become one. There's no difference. The problem is the differences. The problem is the perceived differences. And we're really all one. Well, if we're really all one, it doesn't bode well for community, does it? And most people want community. They want community, they want interactions and so forth. You look carefully at the Gyan Marg, there's no community, okay? You look carefully at the Yoga Marg for what it's really about. There is no community. As the Gita explains, the yogi should sit not too high, not too low, in the forest, on a deerskin, blah, blah, blah. There's not a lot of people around there, Kirtan is not an anga of Yoga Marg. Kirtan is not an anga of the Gyan Marg. Kirtan is an anga of Bhakti Marg. But people like it. Therefore, they do, they start doing Devi Kirtan and Shiva Kirtan and so forth. You need to make the connection, right? So if you talk about the goal of the Gyan Marg, it starts to become pretty bleak compared to our human experience and our pursuit of love, pursuit of community, social interaction. Love means it's valued on a scale of reciprocity. There's this where the giving becomes synonymous with the receiving and so forth. You want to become one with everybody because the differences perceived are a problem. Now play that out. It's a nice thing to say. We're all one. There's no difference. Isn't it great? But how can you apply that in everyday life? You certainly have to exit the political sphere. How can you be involved in social activism and say we're all one? It's a path of extreme renunciation on the one hand, and on the other hand, what are we pursuing in life? Are we pursuing to end suffering, or are we pursuing happiness? And are the two synonymous? I don't think so. End suffering is half of what happiness is about. So I mean, I can go to the hospital and be put under anesthesia. I mean, there's no suffering. There's nothing else either going on that's perceivable. You want to become one with Brahman? There's no difference between you and Brahman. Then there's no experience. If there's no difference, not a qualified difference or internal difference, then there's no experience. Experience requires an object you can reciprocate with. So Brahman may be blissful, but Brahman is bliss. Brahman is knowledge. To identify oneself as Brahman is not to taste bliss. And what's better, to taste bliss or to be? What does it even mean to be bliss? It means it's just sit there. I mean, that's what Brahman does as a facet or a face of the Godhead. Krishna's moving, dancing, he's tasting bliss. So the end result is so of jnana unto itself is so like contradictory to our pursuits of material life. It just that's why in the Shankar school they have to say the world doesn't even really exist. It doesn't really, there is no Maya. There is no world, actually. It doesn't even exist. The more it exists, the more it has some trace of reality in it, even if they may be, our perception of it may be illusory. And this is one of the beauties of the Bhakti path. It has some reality. We are pursuing love because there is love. There is love. Better to have loved imperfectly than to not have loved at all. Better to be in karma than to enter into Brahman. What is the prospect of loving then? So jnana is a very, it's kind of, it's very denying path. It's I mean, there's positivity to it, obviously. I mean, 0, as I said, is positive, compared to negative numbers. But the bhakti is not based on denial, so it has less prospect for being disappointing and disturbing the mind. You can love Krishna, and you can, and all of your friends can come with you. You can have a sangha there. So does that help, Ranishta?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, interesting topics. What else?
So you like to take another question, Guru Maharaj?
Maybe.
Okay.
What is it?
So the next question is from Gunjan Sharma.
So Gunjan says, Dear Guru Maharaj, it is said that there is no time factor in the spiritual sky. However, Ashtakaliya Leelas unfolds over time. How can we understand this?
Yeah, there's no material time, but there's spiritual time. And in spiritual time, I'll give you an example. It's always 12 o'clock somewhere. It's not 12 o'clock where you are for more than a second, but it's always 12 o'clock somewhere. That second is eternal. So although there's an appearance of movement and time in the Leela, it's part of the drama, right? The drama. Let's take the example of a drama for a minute. So a drama can be, have many events happening over even long periods of time, like a biopic, of somebody's life, for example. But it's all appearing in one time, right? On the stage or in the film. It's appearing at that time, many, many times. So, so the drama of Krishna Lila, it's eternal, but there's movement within it. And go back to my example of the sun, it's always 12 o'clock somewhere. So every pastime is always happening at all times. Even as you move from one prakash, one section of the Leela to another, those each Leela is always happening, and it's always 12 o'clock somewhere. So these are some examples to help us to appreciate within like eternal presence. For the sake of Leela, there's an appearance of time. You take the Prakat Leela of Krishna, the manifest Leela of Krishna. He passes from childhood to youth, from youth to adolescence, boyhood to adolescence. What happened to his youth? What happened to his childhood? What happened to his boyhood when he's in adolescence? They're still existing. It's like the moving of the sun, by which we determine the time. The Leelas of Krishna are always appearing in some devotee's heart at some time. Even your experience may move from one to another, one section to another, and so forth. So it's a different type of time. Hope that helps. It's a brief answer. We've gone a little over time, so we'll stop there. Here's a quick follow-up. Do you not label specific something? I can't read the rest of it.
Do you not label specific times in your Ashtakaliya Leela presented as Aprakrit Leela in circle of friends, just label morning or evening? So he's saying you do not label specific times.
Bhumaj, I was wondering if this was why you consciously chose to do that. Usually the Ashtakaliya Leela is labeled like by this time to this time, but you just gave more broader time frames of morning or afternoon or evening.
Well, I think that people give different divisions of the time, of specifics and so forth. I just didn't think it was so. Given those differences, broader labels work. All right, good. Thank you all for your questions. Nice to be with you. Hope to be with you next week as well. Hare Krishna, Hare Om, Jai Radhe, Jai Shyam, Jai Ram.
Sri Guru Maharaj ki jai. So yeah, we'll see you all next week. Have lovely Nrsimha Chaturdasi, if that's what you're celebrating where you are. I think some might have celebrated yesterday. And yeah, as always, please let us know if you have questions, and we'll add you to the list.
Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. Maha ki jai.
Jai.
Mataji's ki jai.